We're going to be sunny tomorrow. Temperatures are going to be well too. We're going to be in the mid 80s, and then rain chances come back on Tuesday. We'll dry out for Wednesday again. We're going to be warm. We're going to be in the upper 80s, and then Thursday and Friday we'll have some decent rain chances to see some heavy showers as well as some thunderstorms, and then the weekend looking pretty. We're going to be sunny and 80.
Get that rain out of there before next weekend.
Yes.
Thanks for watching, but stick around. Law Call is next.
This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Good evening and welcome to WAAY 31 Law Call. I'm Sharon Doviet. Tonight it's Ask Us Anything night. So call in your questions on any legal matter. Maybe you've got property damage issues. Maybe you're dealing with an insurance company. Maybe you've been injured on the job and need to ask questions about that. Any kind of problems at home or work, call in with your legal questions. The 31 Law Call number 256-536-0077. You can call in and be live on the air, or you can text us to that same number and we will have some of those. We've already got texts coming in. You can also email a question any day of the week on any legal topic. You send it to lawcall@waytv.com, and when we get to a show that's on point, we pull out some of your email questions, and we've got some of those tonight as well. Will League is here from Timberlake League and Brooks. Good to have you here.
All right, Sharon, happy Sunday night to you.
Sunday night. The week starts over already.
Right.
We like to get started while we get some phone calls locked in with tonight's You Make the Law Call video. Take a look
This
at
is a
this
crazy
one.
video, actually.
Ooh, a flooded basement. So, okay, this looks bad enough. You think this is bad? Hold on. It gets much worse.
Yeah, wait
Heavy
for it.
rains. You know, we've had a lot of rains lately, but this homeowner is about to get the surprise of his life. Look at that.
You know,
Look at that basement. Okay, when you deal with something like that, you hear the yelling. Everybody was okay in this. The house was not. Flood insurance, homeowners insurance. What would you expect to cover them for something like this?
you know, I mean, you're going to look and see, you know, is this an act of God? Did the pool bust in the back? Is there a pipe that's burst that's caused all that water? Looks like it's, you know, from a storm. You know, if it's flood waters, what's your flood insurance look like? If it's from storm, you know, storm surge, oftentimes there's exclusions. So, yeah, that looks like a total loss, right?
So if you don't have flood insurance, homeowners is probably not going to do it, you think?
Not really. You're
Really?
going to have an act of God exclusion. When you look at your policy and when you flip through it and sign all the stuff, the exclusions are pages and pages and pages long. You're seeing issues in Florida where actually, you know, you can't get, you know, storm insurance. You can't get hurricane insurance. You're finding where the Florida Department of Insurance is struggling to keep people insured, which is causing issues with the economy. You know, same in Alabama, but that particular homeowner, if it was caused by something other than an excludable event, which it probably was, unfortunately, it may not be covered, and it could be devastating. You know, your most expensive asset oftentimes is your home.
Yeah.
And, you know, and there's mortgage, you got the bank involved, and sometimes you own it outright. So it makes you know, where you're going to live, all the things that rises, and it gets serious when it happens, and you and your family have, you know, don't have coverage, savings are gone. Then here you go.
I can't imagine being able to save that house. When you have that kind of damage in the basement, I can't
Right.
imagine that the whole house isn't a loss.
Right. You know, a lot of tornado damages. We, you know, had a lot of stuff, you know, to look at that and try and get those claims, you know, paid and whatnot. But, you know, in terms of storm surge, it's difficult to get it covered.
So we've got text questions coming in like this one from John. John says he had a contractor. He took the contractor to small claims court for work that was done on his home. The judge ruled in his favor. The contractor didn't even show up. Okay, his question now is, though, after the court session's over, I asked the administrative clerk what to do next to get paid, and they wouldn't help on that. So how do you collect? Okay, he won.
Right.
Now what?
You know, that's just part of the battle. You know, anytime you go to litigation, it's either, you know, I tell clients there's only two ways. Either they agree to, you know, get the other party to do something they agree to, or the judge or jury makes them. And so in this particular case, you went to small claims court, tried your case, won, got a verdict, and then the next issue is how do you recover it? Is there insurance behind that? Now, when we try a case, Sharon, most of the time there's insurance, but the jury does not know about that.
Okay.
Okay. But if you try, if they're not independently wealthy, or they don't have the assets, or just refuse to pay, what are your next steps? So after you get the verdict, you can file what's called post-motion discovery once you get the verdict. You can find out assets. Can you try and collect? Can you attach? Can you attach liens? And can you attach liens to any property that they may have to actually execute on that judgment? If not, oftentimes you can set a lien, and when that asset is sold, you may be able to recover at that time. But that takes a long process, and it's time and expensive. And so, unfortunately, when you're looking at litigation, you're trying to resolve something, ask yourself, can the other side pay it? What will it look like on the other side of that verdict? People get angry, and they come in, and hey, let's get them. And well, the question is, a lot of times it's the principle of the matter. I get that, but it's time and expense, yours and everyone else. So taking a reasonable approach to whether or not should you go in. And I'm not saying this person should not have, but you got to be prepared for the next step as well to recover. And oftentimes that's where it falls.
Yeah. We've got callers waiting. Pam's on the line with a question from Huntsville. Hi, Pam. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Well, I'm 81 and I need to rewrite my will.
Okay.
And I was wondering if I turned my volume down. I think you might have been talking. Anyway, I was wondering if you can write a simple will or do a do-it-yourself will in Alabama. I don't have any battling relatives.
Okay.
But I also know that wills can do funny things.
Yeah. So what do you think? Do it yourself or
I mean, there's a lot, AI, there's all kinds of, tools out there, but a lot of times there's going to be the question, is it valid? There's strict execution requirements in Alabama. It's got to be witnessed by two people in the same room, an administrator, and, and there are a lot of things that you procedurally have to do to make sure it's valid. And it's really too important of an issue not to get expert advice to make sure it does what you want to do, and not only for your family members, for yourself, for just many different reasons, because things, get complicated when there's not one or it's not effective. And so, your state, have to intestate succession takes over. Sometimes the county administrator has to come in, and that's different than what you wanted for what is yours and what you've worked for. And so it's too important to, to leave that just as something you get off the internet. You may also want to look at a living will. We have a lot of people that don't have them still.
Yeah.
In the accident world, we do, with litigation and car wrecks and things, and the loved one trying to make decisions for their injured party, injured family member.
So living will would be to cover what?
That's right. So any advanced health directive. So you can go ahead, if someone's incapacitated, you can determine who can make medical decisions for you if you're incapacitated, and it helps out your family, everyone involved, and that is something, really to get. And also a power of attorney. I would suggest going and sitting down with some type of lawyer who does probate work that can advise you on, is a trust that better for you? Is that something that you could have a trustee, you could still have the benefit of your assets, but then you could leave it for your loved ones. So there's many different tools to determine what really fits you. So I would go and sit down and talk with someone, and it's not that expensive actually.
We got this text question in. My niece was in a fatal accident. If my brother had been divorced from her mother, can he get a separate lawyer? So I guess there's a case going on, and the niece has passed away. We're sorry for your loss. So the mother of that person has got a lawyer. Can the father get a lawyer to be part of that action?
Okay, well,
they've been divorced 20 years.
Right. When you have a death case, all right, then the person's capacity to file a lawsuit on his or her behalf is now gone, right? So it's up to the probate court to determine who can file, who is the personal representative of the estate. The last caller, what we were just talking about, is you're naming someone to make decisions in your stead if you cannot make them, if you've perished, right? And so the law allows the personal representative or next friend to come in and file a lawsuit on the behalf of the estate of the deceased. Who that person is sometimes is they're given preference by statute. Is it a surviving spouse? Okay. Is there a child? What's this connection? If there's not any, then the county administrator comes in, takes control of the estate, and the county administrator can then hire the attorney and go from there. If they've been divorced 20 years, if there's a will that names this other party, the probate court will probably go with that unless there's, again, something wrong with the will and it's not effective. Okay. Or the personal representative is unfit to serve.
Okay. We've got Eve on the line with a question from Newmarket. Hi, Eve. Understand you've got a problem with a check.
Well, good evening, and thank you all for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I mailed a check to my mortgage company on the 31st of March, and have been proven that it has arrived in Birmingham and was mailed from Birmingham to California on the 1st of April. Has not arrived and has not been cashed.
Okay.
So far, good in one way. However, of course, no, they say, well, you should cancel the check and mail a new one. I send it registered mail,
Okay.
and that cost $5.85,
Okay.
and it costs $25 to cancel a check.
Right.
Yeah.
I do not feel like I should have to pay this since I did what I was supposed to do. So I would just like to know what can be done, if anything, please.
Well, that's a good point. You put your stamp on it, you pay the service. You know, is the Postal Service, they immune? If something happened, it didn't get there, I don't think you're going to have a claim against them to make them pay it. But I hear you. You did what you were supposed to do. But the reality is, if the mortgage company doesn't get the check for whatever reason, even though it's a third party's fault, then it goes against your credit. And then they start whatever action they take against you. And in the long run, trying to go after the Postal Service, you know, for those damages, I think will ultimately harm you more than it's going to help. I get it, you're right. However, canceling the check and going ahead and reissuing another one, and you may want to look at online banking. I know that may freak you out, but in terms of some of the instant transfers that can be done, your bankers can help you with that. My mom didn't like to do it either.
Yeah,
but she's now, you know, she can now do it, and here we go. It's great.
Yeah.
But this is the issue you run into, and you don't want your credit damaged ultimately. And so once you have a missed payment, even if the third party's fault, trying to get through that red tape, again, is going to cost you a lot more money than the $25 to cancel it and just reissue it.
We've noticed a lot of things getting stolen out of the mail, out of mailboxes and things. If somebody wound up, Eve, with your check and they cash that check, then you've got two problems, because you're out the money and you haven't paid your mortgage, and you got to go do something about that. So I know the $25 seems like a lot to pay, but if it hasn't gotten where it's supposed to be, you may want to protect yourself that way.
That's right.
Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. We've got a lot of questions coming in. Stay with us. It's Ask Us Anything night.
And wrongful death law firm, Timberlake, League and Brooks, featuring the knowledge and experience of attorney Michael Timberlake, attorney Will League, attorney Heath Brooks, attorney William Maservi, and hosted by broadcaster and family law attorney Sharon Doviet. This is WAAY 31 Law Call.
Welcome back to 31 Law Call. I'm Sharon Joviet here with Will League from Timberlake, League and Brooks. They're personal injury attorneys, so everything from car accidents, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence.
Right, you know,
all
Sharon,
those
it's,
kind of things.
summer's coming up. We've been involved in a horrible boat death case. Summertime injuries are starting to happen. The more people are out, more car wrecks. Sadly, you're seeing a lot more, activity on the roads and even on the water. And, we're gonna start, people are starting to de-winterize their stuff and get out in the water. And it's dangerous, and there are rules of the water. There are, it's under federal law if it's a navigable waterway. There was just this last week was a tragic accident in Lauderdale County. 3 people, just
Yes.
awful during a tournament, going too fast, and many different scenarios.
Yeah.
And so just think about that as you start, getting out for the summer. Kids start getting out to school, graduation parties, travel, all that stuff, and it's real. And do what you can to minimize the risk.
Be careful. Got callers waiting. John's on the line with a question from Harvest. Hi, John. Thanks for calling. What's your question tonight?
Yes. My question is, there's this new phenomenon, I guess, it's called street racing, et cetera, whatever it is. But I noticed that in Birmingham, they've set up a special task force to try to handle it. It's happening in other cities, but it's also happening here in Huntsville. Can you address what you know about the city of Huntsville, what they are doing for this, like I say, as far as I know, it's a new phenomenon type thing. But because there are people getting injured, there are people getting killed, and I just wondered if you all have handled any of that.
Very
Thank you.
dangerous, right?
We have actually, and we on the civil side. So remember, it's illegal. It's illegal to race on the street. It's illegal, reckless driving, all the things, right? When we come involved, had several cases where drag racing and, father was out in the front yard with his children. They, swerved off the road, came and hit just horrible injuries and whatnot, and people are getting killed, but it's nothing new. So, so you've had people going on Mount Martin Road and just all that, that's what young kids did way back, and I guess it's coming back. And this case was, 10 years ago, and we've had several since then with regard to just the youth and loving the cars, and I get it, but people are getting hurt. So, I can't speak for the city of Huntsville. However, the police departments, they're very responsive in how they deploy their resources. If it's a public nuisance or public harm, they're willing, able, and able to listen to what's going on and apply those resources to try and sort that out. So, I would advise is go down to the precinct, sit and talk to them. They're reasonable folks. They want to hear what's happening to help the community. And so, if you could go down to whatever precincts in your area, and start working up the chain that way and see what kind of resources can be provided. Now, they've got several different task forces. I'm not certain it's just like the one in Birmingham, however, it'd be interesting to see, what they're doing and how they're, allocating resources to that problem you're talking about.
Because if they wind up hurting somebody and you sue them civilly trying to get money out of it, you got to be able to collect something, right?
Right.
So,
and it's
what have they got?
The law in Alabama is you have to have liability coverage. So
Okay.
if you're out racing doing something stupid, a lot of times you're going to be covered. But again, there could be an exclusion. If it's an organized race, it's going to be exclusion on your policy. And so they're going to be dropped. They're, on the criminal side, I've had to go to jail. You kill yourself, somebody else. Obviously, horrible things. On the civil side, I had a family of 4 going to Florida. 2 people were killed, and these kids were racing. They were young and dumb and whatnot, but the caller's right. Putting the resources towards trying to curb that activity, and at the same time, spread awareness. What else can you do, right?
Yeah. We got a text question in 2007. He had a hernia repair, and in the last several years has developed sexual dysfunction that he thinks is related to that. Okay, that 2007, if it really is related, you'd have to prove it, right? Or
Right.
He's thinking, I guess, medical malpractice.
All right, so he had a surgical intervention in a hernia. I think he said an inguinal hernia. So basically, under Medical Malpractice Liability Act of Alabama, you have to show that there were a breach of the standard of care. So what was the particular surgery? What were the risks involved? Were you informed of those risks? Because you may not have informed consent based on a common complication, or was this something that the doctor should have known about, right? And so you'll have to have an expert come in and testify that there was a breach of the standard of care in performing that surgery, and that whatever they did wrong, whatever that breach was the proximate cause of the damage that you sustained. And so was there a proximate cause? Was there a time relationship? Was there, an anatomy expert that can come in and say, yes, this was cut, therefore that will cause this. And so can you make a scientific link to prove your case to a jury? You may have a claim, but if it happened in 2007, you have a statute of limitations issue, the meaning that you have to file within 2 years of that date. If you're in Alabama, if it's in Florida, if it's in Tennessee, that's 1 year. There are some saving statutes that go beyond that, but they're in extreme circumstances depending on the case, and oftentimes they don't go over 4 years. Maybe there's a product case, and that's 6 years. But again, under all those terms, you're going to be outside the applicable statute of limitations. But again, those are the elements you'd have to prove to move forward with your particular case.
We've got Gregory on the line with a question. Hi, Gregory. Thanks for calling in. What's your question tonight?
Yes, ma'am. I've got my land and everything in the probate office in Morgan County.
Okay.
And I need to get it. Somebody figure out how I can get it to where I can clear it to where I can get it off the probate down there in the county. I've been paying my land taxes and own it every year since I've owned it, and I've had it since '89. But anyway, she passed away about 20. It's been about 20 years ago now, and I wasn't ever thinking about it and everything. But I got to figure out some way to get that probate off my,
You got a mortgage on it, Greg? Did you see?
Yes, it was a mortgage I got on it. It's in the probate office.
But you've paid it now?
Yeah, I've already paid it and everything. But she passed away before I could get that cleared in the Morgan County Court.
Okay, so you bought it from the lady and she's perished now, correct?
Yes, sir, it's my aunt.
Okay. Okay, your aunt. Okay, so you need to find her estate attorney, whoever that was, whoever has the authority, like we talked about earlier in the show. You'll have a personal representative for your estate. Who that is, sometimes it's the county administrator. Let's say it happened a long time ago. You would have to get an attorney, file with the probate office to have a county administrator then appointed to address the issue on behalf of the deceased if the estate is no longer in existence. But oftentimes your attorney can find out who handled the estate, what was the nature of the was it a will, was it to bequeath to someone else, was she a bona fide owner? So you need to go and sit down with a probate attorney that can lead you through that process, because it is complicated. But again, you want to at least find out if she had the right to sell it to you, and then, or was she the bona fide owner, or were you the bona fide purchaser, I guess is what I'm going to say. So go and sit down and talk with someone, but those would be the steps to at least get the process started.
Got a text question in. Somebody's saying that he was just getting sick when his wife divorced him. After that divorce, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and has become handicapped. And some of his friends were encouraging him to take her back to court and try and get alimony, because she's got money, she's got retirement, and he's asking, is it too late to do that, and whether men can get alimony in the state of Alabama. So if you need to go back and take a look at the divorce decree, if the divorce did not give you some alimony, or at least reserve alimony as an issue, you can't go back in and reopen that. It's too late. But check the language of it, maybe even go meet with a family law attorney to see, is it reserved in any way, or could you interpret any part of it to be alimony? Sometimes it can be written in a funny way that you might be able to argue that was alimony, and if you were awarded some, you could go back and ask for more. So take a look at that. And men can get alimony in the state of Alabama.
How often is it reserved?
Not very often, not very often. Judges don't do that. Many times when people divorce and it's uncontested,
right,
you might save it, because it might be a way to negotiate and get somebody to go ahead and agree to the terms with the possibility of reopening it later. We got this email question from Richie. Was in a wreck. The other driver stopped suddenly in the parking lot and then backed up into Richie. Said it was his fault, but said it was that driver's fault, but then changed her story when it came around to it later. What can you do if somebody later changes their story and you don't have a police report?
All right, so character of a witness. Yes, she can come and testify for you. The question is going to be, is she credible? Does a judge or a jury, or is she, would they believe her testimony? Now, I get it, she's your friend. Was there a witness there? Is there a third party that can also, because that would help your case if a third party could testify she backed into you. But again, your friend can testify, and it's just like any witness. What's the character of the witness? Is he or she believable? And do you have any other evidence to back up her statement? So you can certainly bring her, and if she's believable, then it helps your case. If she's not, then it doesn't, depending on what other type of factors do you have. Was there a video camera? Was there a witness? You said she ultimately admitted it. Who heard that? because you can bring into evidence a statement against interest that's outside the hearsay rules. So there's many different ways that you can go about proving your case, but absent those factors, that makes it difficult. But you got to see what's admissible, what you say, is it outside hearsay?
We're going to take a break. Be right back answering more of your questions. Stay with us. Here's how to get in touch with Will League with Timberlake League and Brooks. They are personal injury attorneys, so car accidents, medical mistakes, 256-536-0770 or 800-804-2502. The website is law-injury.com. And if you like them on Facebook, you can learn more about the law that way.
And our very own Sharon Doviet, family law attorney, Huntsville, Alabama, 256-539-7337, www.sharonfamilylaw.com.
Thanks for all your calls and questions, and we'll see you next week.